Or on this computer. Oh, sorry. Yes, hold on. All right, now Katie, I'm sending it back to you. Make host. Yes. Okay, guys. So this is Katie Berens, as you can see on the screen. Katie, you're on a really big screen.
Okay, cool.
She is an industrial athletic trainer with Dot Foods. Is that right?
Yep.
Hold on, let me fix the lights. There we go. So I know Katie from my DAT program. She graduated the same time that I did, so yay for DATs. So she's going to talk to us today about her setting and how it kind of differentiates, I guess, from the norm that you guys are used to. So Katie, it's all yours.
All right, let me, let's see, share. I gotta share my PowerPoint with you. Can you guys see it?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Let me see if I can figure this out. Cool. So this won't be super long, but I just want to give you guys kind of an idea of what industrial athletic training is, occupational athletic training. It's really just the same thing. You'll hear either term, but I'm going to give you kind of a summary of what we do here at DOT and in Illinois, and then we'll see what kind of questions you have. So just a little bit about me before we dive into the serious stuff. I'm located in Illinois, as I already said. I'm married with one kiddo and a whole bunch of animals, as you can see. I work full-time at Dot Foods Incorporated as an industrial athletic trainer. And then I also am the head volleyball coach for our local high school. So I'll talk a lot about kind of the perks of industrial athletic training, but one of the things that I'll tell you right at the beginning is that I feel like there's a lot of work-life balance, so I wanted to add in the whole coaching piece because that's something I don't think you'd get to do, obviously, in the traditional setting. Volleyball is a big passion of mine, so that's enough about me. Educational background, as you can see, I've got my my bachelor's in biological sciences. I went through the MAT program at St. Louis University, and then I worked for a couple years and then decided I wanted to get my doctorate, and that's when I started the DAT program through AT Still. My professional career, I have been at DOT the whole time. When I was wrapping up my master's at SLU, I didn't want to be unemployed. That was like my biggest fear. And at the time, I wasn't like set on industrial athletic training by any means, but when it came down to deciding between a couple different jobs, DOT had the best hours, the best pay, and the best benefits. And as a new grad, that's really what I was focused on. So that's initially why I chose DOT. But I can tell you right now, I would probably never leave the industrial setting. I also did 2 years of some PRN coverage for the local hospital here, doing primarily high school athletics, just so I could kind of stay sharp on the traditional athletic training skill set. We don't have a whole bunch of emergency care at DOT. We don't do nearly as much emergency care type of stuff as I remember going through with school. So I wanted to stay kind of sharp on that. I don't do it anymore just because I coach and because I have a kiddo and I'd rather be home with him in the evenings, but I did do a little bit of both for a couple years. I've been at DOT for 5 years, and there's been a lot of changes. When I started, I was the only athletic trainer, and then we hired our second sometime the fall after I started. And we now currently have staff of 5, 3 full-time ATs, and then 2 grad assistants. So that's pretty exciting. We just added our kind of grad assistant position last year, and it's been going really well so far. When I started, we didn't have an office. That's why I put office space down there, because it's kind of a big deal. We were pretty much like nomad athletic trainers that walked through the warehouse and checked blood pressure and tried to evaluate somebody standing in a warehouse. It was total chaos. And now we've got 3 athletic training rooms, 3 athletic training facilities, whatever you want to call it. We've got one in our dry warehouse, which is all dry goods. So if you picture like crackers and pretzels, stuff like that. And then we've got an ATR in our frozen warehouse. So anything frozen, ice cream, meat, anything you can think of in a freezer section. We've got an office in that kind of location. And then we have an athletic training room just for our driver population. So lots of office space now, when 5 years ago we had nothing. And then when I first started, in terms of services, my boss, to be perfectly honest, had no idea what an athletic trainer really did. So when we started, it was pretty minimal in terms of services, and now we have enough space to do rehab on site with all of our patients. We have a lot of prevention programs that I'm going to dive into in a little bit, and we're starting to expand on some things in terms of like post-surgical service offering and stuff like that. And then the last thing is, we're expanding nationwide. When I started, it was just me, and now we are hiring at all of our locations across the country. So we have 5 staff members in Illinois, and then we'll have 1 at each location, and we have 13 different distribution centers currently. So lots of changes in 5 years, which is pretty exciting. This is just a quick little view of what my little athletic training room looks like in the middle of the warehouse. I wish I could have gotten you guys a picture of the warehouse. But basically, all of those windows that you see blinds over stare out right into the warehouse. I'm kind of back in the corner, so I'm not in the middle of things, but I can see what all's going on, and I have pretty good access if for some reason there would be an emergent care situation. And our freezer setup is pretty similar. The office space is just a little bit smaller. And it's not directly into the warehouse because our freezer is -5 degrees when it's warm. So they keep all the offices insulated and sectioned off. This is kind of a current status of what we offer in terms of services. We have a whole bunch of injury prevention programs. We just launched a shoulder prevention program over the last year. We've had an ankle prevention program for the last couple years. We do FMS testing with all new employees. And a lot of that's really just to get an idea of who are some of our people that have funky movement patterns, who are those people that could be predisposed to injury, and how can we get involved with them early on. And then there was a stretching program before I started, but we've enhanced that quite a bit with our current staff. We do all the injury evaluations for any work-related injury. And then if somebody comes to us with a personal issue, we get a lot of like slow pitch softball injuries, or like derby car racing is really big around here. So we'll have a bunch of random injuries from that kind of stuff depending on the season. So we'll treat anybody that walks in the door. It doesn't have to be specifically work-related. And then we will do in-house rehab with people if it's appropriate, depending on the situation. I'm also involved with physical ability testing, which is basically like taking somebody through a lifting test to make sure that they are physically able to do the job. All of our warehouse jobs are considered safety sensitive. So they require a test that just proves that they can safely lift up to a certain weight, depending on the job they're applying for, and that they're physically able to do it in the first place, like fit enough to go through it. We have a whole screening process for that. Kind of similar to, what is it, a PPE, pre-participation exam, kind of similar to that, but just a little different just because it's a work setting. And then the biggest thing that we've rolled out in the last year is we currently offer diagnostic ultrasound to anybody that has a musculoskeletal injury and we want to get an idea of what's going on without having to wait for that MRI to get scheduled and those results to get processed. Our other athletic trainer who covers frozen has been trained to do those, and then we have all of the imaging sent off to one of our orthopedic specialists, and he reviews it to confirm a diagnosis. So that's a pretty big deal, just because I don't think there's a lot of people in the industry that are doing that. And that's a pretty big deal as an athletic trainer to get trained on that. So I just wanted to brag a little bit on that. My main responsibilities, I am currently kind of in the process for being trained to be a manager. So there's a couple different things that I'm managing right now. I manage our grad assistant program. I manage all of our data collection. So I'm talking like consult numbers, how many people we see a week, what type of consults were they? Was it a rehab? Was it an evaluation? Was it some kind of prevention program screening? I manage our schedule, so I kind of distribute workload amongst our current employees. And then I also provide coverage for our dry warehouse, which is around 1,100 employees. I'm currently working with probably 80, so not near the head count of, the full head count. But I only cover day shift currently. We're probably working with around 400 employees right now between all of our staff members. So we stay pretty busy, which I know you guys do as well at your clinical settings. And then I do a lot of our standard work development. So the first thing I think of is like standard work development in the traditional setting would be like an EAP for what to do in an emergency situation where there's a tornado, right? You need to know what to do with all the people in the building. We do similar things for puncture wounds, for hyper and hypotension. There's a lot of different safety risks when it comes to operating our machinery if you've got somebody that's diabetic and it's not managed well. So I've been put kind of in charge of managing that work development so that we make sure we have the right standard care across the business, not just in Illinois. So some of it's not your traditional athletic training and some of it is. A lot of my patient interaction is pretty traditional, but a lot of the outside work is probably more specific to the business. And then just a couple things, if you're interested in occupational health or industrial athletic training, the first thing you need to know is when you're done with school, you will have the skill set to work with any of the patients that will walk in the door, for the most part. There's always the weird scenario, but you're perfectly prepared to work in this setting, but there's always things that you could look into to help improve your preparedness for the job or just help you be more educated on this type of work. So I've got a whole list of things. I'm not going to read through them all, but the biggest things that I utilize on a regular basis, like I said, we do FMS screening. So I would recommend functional movement exposure if you haven't had a lot of that by the time you graduate, and this is something you're interested in, I would look into that. I'm selective functional movement assessment level 1. So that would be something that I would recommend if, it kind of goes really well with the FMS screen if it's something you see yourself using. And then I don't have any of like the corrective exercise or like the early intervention specialist training, but I've looked into it quite a bit. And if you're not interested in functional movement stuff, I think that would be another good option to consider. And I've done some informal ergonomics training since I've started here, just because it's become a bigger topic in terms of injury prevention at our location specifically. So there's just some things to think about if you really are interested in this work setting in general. It varies quite a bit from location to location. I think we do a lot more athletic training, like the whole scope of our practice, while I know there's other industrial locations that are just injury prevention and like only first aid. So it kind of depends on the company that you're working for. But any of these options would be really beneficial in any industrial position. So why would you choose this setting? I know a lot of times we go into athletic training because we want to stay involved in athletics, and that's the main reason I went into it. I played college volleyball, and I wanted to stay actively involved in that environment. I love college athletics. And then I got about halfway through school, and I was like, you know what? I want to have a life. So that's why I considered industrial quite a bit in the beginning. That's one of the reasons why I'll probably never leave it. The work-life balance is the biggest benefit to me personally, because it allows me to be my best self at work as well as my best self at home. The long-term relationships that you build with your patients, I think that's slightly different than the traditional setting, just because the relationship you have with your patients doesn't end after 4 years of college. It's there as long as they decide to be an employee at DOT. So, I mean, I've been there 5 years now. I have patients that come up to me. They're perfectly fine. They have no injury, but they want to tell me about their grandkid and what they did at T-ball last weekend. So it's cool to establish that kind of relationship with your patients. And I know you can have that in the traditional setting as well, but I feel like there's some more opportunity for that long-term relationship, which is pretty cool. Another perk, I think, with the industrial world is you get a good big picture impact, because not only do they have to return to work that day, or you think about it in your traditional world, coming back to being able to play in that game, but they're also providing for a family or themselves. They're providing for loved ones. They're making money to pay the rent. So there's a lot of things outside of just getting back to work that day that you can impact. And then if you're looking at things in terms of health-related quality of life, I mean, that's how I try to look at things when I'm treating a patient. If we don't handle this shoulder injury correctly, it's not only going to impact his day, it's not only going to impact his wages, but it might impact his ability to be able to work in this setting for the rest of his life. And that can obviously be a big deal. So there's a lot of long-term things that you have to think about when you're managing that acute situation. And then I listed this just because I think it is a perk, even though it shouldn't be the reason why you go into this setting. The benefits and the pay are better in my opinion, but I've also only worked in this setting. So I know there's room for argument. That's all I have for formal presentation stuff. Let me turn this PowerPoint off if I can figure out how. Does it just stop share?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
I'm going to switch around. So guys, if you have questions, there's a camera right behind you. Okay, so I'm gonna have you raise your hand. Hold on, let me switch it real fast. I'm gonna have you raise your hand, and then when I call on you, you're gonna stand up and you're gonna turn around and you're gonna look at that camera. Okay? Huh? See how it like moves with me?
Yeah.
So right now it's who has questions? Go ahead. All right, let me start off, Katie. So you mentioned one of the things you said, business classes might be important to, or business.
Yes.
So can you explain more about that, like what in particular?
Yeah, so specifically for my job, you know, we do a lot with workman's compensation. So even if it was like a work comp 101, I mean, I had no idea. I knew nothing about work comp when I came into this. And there's a whole list of things that I could go over with you, and we wouldn't have the time to cover it. It's workman's compensation is crazy, and there's a lot of legal things that you need to know. There's a lot of definitions that it all sounds like a whole bunch of abbreviations, but it's insane, all of the different aspects of work comp that you're never exposed to, obviously, in school. So that would be something to consider, as like classes on workman's compensation and what does that look like. I'm currently doing some work with budgeting, and I remember in school, at least for SLU, like we talked about how you bid for supplies, like how you set up bids so you can get the best deal on things. But I'm talking more like we have to do pitches on return, what is it, ROI, return of, what's the term, you know it, return on investment, that's it. So like return on investment of why they should hire another person that does my job. Why is it more economical to have us in the company than it is to just hope that another bad injury doesn't happen? So there's a lot of things to learn in terms of like how the business side of things, just how do you propose things, how do you go through proposals, how do you pitch for staff extensions, how do you, we've done some work with like budgeting for workman's compensation, so different budgeting pieces. I don't know I can't give you a list of specific classes, but I mean, I think there would be some things to consider if you're gonna look into this type of work.
What about like
I said, it depends on the company too.
Oh, true. Do you do a lot of insurance?
I don't do anything with insurance. It's wonderful.
That is nice.
Yeah, we have a whole like in-house group. Like we have two different options. So if it's a personal injury and we have somebody that's going to be off for a long period of time for whatever the reason is, our HR department actually helps manage all the short-term disability and that kind of thing. If it's a work-related injury, our nurse manages all of it. So I don't have to touch it, and that is great.
Okay. Questions, comments, concerns, anything? Anybody got anything? Go ahead. Yeah, you got to turn and look at it. See if it'll. Between you and me. So, 2 questions. Well, tell her who you are and what year you are.
My name's Tristan, and I'm a junior.
Can you speak up a little bit? I heard Tristan.
Yeah,
Tristan?
I'm a junior.
Come closer. It's just the webcam up there.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. 2 questions. What do you have to wear every day?
Well, I changed shirts because I came back from practice, but that's just a straight up long sleeve t-shirt. And I'm wearing some yoga pants.
So
Like if I'm, there's 2 different wardrobes. So if I'm in my office hanging out, just working with patients, I will pretty much wear whatever I want as long as it's decent to wear in the office. If I have a presentation with the vice president of Dot Foods, I am wearing dress pants and a nice shirt. So it depends on the day, but primarily I'm wearing yoga pants and probably a nicer shirt.
Did all of you guys just get excited about working?
Yeah.
No khakis and polos, they're excited about.
That was another reason to not go into traditional athletic training. I have not worn khakis in 5 years, and it's or polos, man. I don't miss that.
No, I don't.
All right. What are your hours look like normally?
So when I started, we covered 2 nights a week. So I would work like 8 to 5, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then, it's tracking my movement.
Yeah.
That's funny. I would work 8 to 5, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then I would work like 1 to 10 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then we would kind of rotate what nights we cover. But now, since I'm headed towards a kind of a manager track, I work primarily 8 to 5. And then every like 3rd week, I'm working from 1 to probably 8 p.m., just depending on the week. But it's pretty like 8 to 5 type of work for this location. Now I know, I've kind of kept up on like, where is it that Candace works? Work, I can't remember. Anyways, there's a couple different companies that they'll do shifts. So some will go from like 6 to 2, and then the next shift will be from 2 to 7, and the next shift is from like 7 to 1 a.m. So it depends on the company, but ours is primarily 8 to 5 or like second shift, 1 p.m. to 9 p.m.
You have a question? Go ahead. You have to come over here so she can hear.
Yeah, I'm just staring at myself right now.
It'll track in a second, hopefully. I can just talk to you. Yeah, the speakers over here.
My question is, you had mentioned the GA positions. How does that compare to the traditional setting GA positions?
That's a good question. So we're still probably, I would say, working out some of the kinks in it, but we basically what we set up for our first 2 grad assistants was that they are covering night shift because that's what works with their class schedule. So, for example, our current GA comes in from 7 to 10 p.m. on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And then Thursday and Friday, he comes in at 5 because that's when the shift starts and that's when the most people are there. And he's there till typically 8 or 9. It just depends on the night. But we've set it up so that they do like 20 hours a week, basically. 20 or less, depending on what their school schedule is and what all they have going on. And they're just covering night shift. It worked really well with our first GA. So that's what we've stuck with for the second. And it seems to work well with the whole school and everything.
Can you talk about the internship opportunities that you might have?
Yeah, so every summer we have an internship for occupational health, and it's varied a little bit every year, just depending on the intern and what their degree is and what they're wanting to go into. But this last year we had our first athletic training intern, and she revamped a rehab prevention program that we have. What else did she work on? She did a lot of statistical analysis for us, which is something that you probably don't get a ton of work on unless you're working on like your master's. But she did a lot of data analysis for us in terms of, we've started using the DASH which is the disabilities of the arm, shoulder, and hand. It's a survey that looks at upper extremity pain. So we've started using that quite a bit with our warehouse employees. And she did all of the survey administration and the data analysis, and then she had to present it to our entire HR group. So the opportunities would be different every year, but between the projects that we gave her, and then she had probably 20 hours a week of working with real patients. She got quite a bit of hands-on exposure in the setting. So it was good. We have the internship open actually for next summer if anybody wants to make a trip north. Probably not as humid here. That would be my pitch. But it's a pretty cool opportunity. It'll be unique every year, but it is a paid internship. And you get, I think it's over 300 hours or something. It's crazy how many hours she was here.
You said paid, and a lot of people perked up.
It is paid, yeah. I think it's somewhere between like 13 and 15 an hour. It's pretty good pay.
They want to know where you apply. Send me the link and I'll send it out to them.
I can do that, yeah. Yeah, I can't hear anything. You're gonna have to talk to the microphone.
Come around, because that guy's not trying. Tell her who you are and your year.
Hi, my name's Savannah. Currently, I sound like I've smoked a bunch of cigarettes, but I promise I haven't. So, my question was, oh, darn, I forgot the application. Okay, so we were wondering who can apply for it. So I'm a first year student, but can I apply for it, or does it need to be a second year or third year student applying for that internship?
We have it open to anybody. I'm trying to think how to say this. The only thing I would consider when you're applying, so our last intern did a bunch of rehab, because one of her goals for the summer was to get a lot of hands-on experience with patients and kind of managing a case from beginning to end. So we tailored the internship around that. So I don't know what your curriculum, where everything falls in your curriculum. But if you were to apply and to get accepted, we would have to tailor things based off of what you've been exposed to so far. So if we've got somebody who's already had, musculoskeletal evaluation and all the rehab courses, that's probably more ideal just based off of what we want, but we don't have any, you have to be through these certain courses.
Okay.
So depending on who gets accepted, the experience gets tailored around what they need.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Questions? You guys good? Okay. That seems to be it.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Katie.
Yeah, no problem. If they have questions that come up later, don't hesitate to contact me. So.
All right. Awesome. Will do. Thanks so much. Have a good night.
Yeah,
Tell
you
your little
too.
one I said hello.
I will.
Bye.
Bye.